your spouse is someone that you've chosen, right? And you spend some time thinking about it. Sometimes could be years, right? Dating that person, getting to know that person, and finally deciding this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Okay, so you chose your spouse, but yet, how come you can't love your spouse, the one that you have chosen, unconditionally, but you can love your children unconditionally, and your children are people you did not choose? You're listening to the WADT podcast, and this week we'll be talking about the hot potato, which is divorce. The number of divorces and annulments in Singapore has been hovering above the 7,000 mark for many years now. In 2019, 55% of the divorces involves a child under the age of 21. Now, cumulatively, more than 40,000 children over the last 10 years are affected by divorce to varying degrees. Now, often parents assume that children are resilient, and so long as they are not showing too much negative emotions, like being depressed or feeling sad, or doing poorly in school, parents will assume that the kids are okay. But are they? What do you think, Hafiz?
Yes, so you're right. We always don't look at other people's perspective, especially when we talk about couples, right? Parents. There's a it's called a researcher that say, or expert that say, that divorce actually itself doesn't affect the kid, but it's how we handle the divorce, how divorce is being handled, how the couple go through the process of before divorce, uh, during the divorce itself, and after. So I think today, the the although there are a lot of information, a lot of help that are readily available through counseling, through psychotherapy, I think couples still, many cases where I hear and I see couples still, go through divorce in a way such that it affects the kids negatively.
How about you? What do you think, Kevin? Should parents assume that kids are resilient and therefore they're doing well, or they will be okay?
No, that assumption itself is very dangerous. Just because the kid doesn't say anything doesn't mean that the kid's fine. For those children who actually do voice out their struggle or displeasure or anger or they basically rent out, they are just one aspect of the kids that they are suffering or going through certain things. But those kids that don't say anything, in fact, those are the kids that I think we need to actually follow up with them and to help them process what has happened. So no, I think it's a very dangerous assumption to think that children are okay or will be okay, or they'll get out, they'll outgrow it or something. Yeah, I think that's a very dangerous assumption.
Well, I think some of you know I'm a child of divorce, and my parents went through a divorce when I was 10. But interestingly, they're still legally married today. So they never really went through it to the end. For whatever reason, they kind of stalled the whole process, but they lived separate lives. And so my sister and I, my elder sister and I, were kind of caught in between since then, And now, so if using my family as just a sample size of two, divorce affects children very differently. So as far as I can tell, now I do not know exactly for sure, but as far as I can tell, it did not affect my sister as much as it affected me. Okay, so just based on the sample size of two, it's already a 50-50 kind of chance. So, but even then, 50-50 is a big percentage, right? So there are 50% of children who could be quite seriously, adversely affected by divorce. Who else among us is a child of divorce besides me?
Well, that would be me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes.
How was your experience like? Would you mind sharing?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, okay, so I think like what you said, Parkson, I I think it affects children differently. For my case, I think I was already in if I would say, a dysfunctional family. So when my parents finally went through the whole process of divorce, I was personally relieved. I know that might be a terrible thing to say or think, but I believe that divorce is a complicated issue, really, and it is possible to have multiple emotions. And so back to your question when you ask, is it safe for parents to assume that children are doing all right? I think children are processing a lot of things and coping in many different ways. So I think it's a long process. So if you're talking about how children respond to divorce, I think you'll have to really consider the long-term effect. Yeah. But like you said, but it's true what you say. My sisters, there are 8 of us in a family. I grew up in a blended family. So my sisters, they seem to cope a lot better than my brothers. So there may be a thing between the differences in how boys and girls cope. Yeah, in terms of the separation.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure about gender, but whether boys cope better or girls cope better, but definitely age does play a part. And I think if today's divorce rates are affecting mostly those who are married within 5 to 9 years, so we can assume that the children are still either either before teenagers or during the early teenage stage, and these are very vulnerable stages, and definitely the effect will be much greater than if their children are much more grown up.
I
But I would like
agree.
to say also, like Parkson, like when you said that you think that your sister handled it better, or yeah, I would say handled better. Maybe she's not. Maybe she is affected, but like you say, handled better. But there's also assumption on your part. I'm assuming that you are assuming it, because have you actually spoke to her about it and conversation with her about how did she actually feel about it? Because if she didn't say anything, that doesn't mean she's not affected. You see, so that again goes back to my point. We cannot assume that people are okay just because they don't say anything. Yeah. So, and then also it may be a long term. It might be a long thing, like a longer term thing, like what Elvinas said, that it may not hit them straight away, but maybe like 5-10 years later, then they're like, oh, they can't. So yeah. So
Yeah.
my assumption is that it would affect the person, but to some varying degrees, lah. Yeah.
I think you are absolutely right. Yes, that's why I say I do not know exactly absolutely for sure, but just on the surface it seems that way. But although having said that, the difference between my sister and I is that she is divorced, but I'm not. Okay, although I have to admit, my marriage wasn't very good in the earlier years, and well, thankfully, it improved over time. So I think one way or another, it will have an effect, and I think some of the effects came out in the MSF report or survey that was done about the long-term effects of divorce on children, and so that included things like they mostly would earn less, has less money in the CPF, probably not have a degree or something like that, Now, I think that was a very groundbreaking survey done by MSF, touching on this very sensitive area, but I think it's needed. But having said that, I think this survey did not cover a very important aspect of the lives of these children of divorce, and that is the emotional and psychological or mental impact on them. So I think that is something that I think it is the cause of all the other things, right? So
Yes.
not having a degree and things like that. These are probably just byproducts or the symptoms of something that's what is happening inside of them. All right. So let's focus on before divorce. Elvina, if you don't mind, I want to go back to
Yes.
you. You talked about being in a dysfunctional family, and so when your parents actually took that step and went through the divorce, it was more a relief I guess, to you. I know it can be a relief to some couples, because they have been really struggling in their marriage. Yeah. So in what way was it dysfunctional?
Wow, dysfunctional, as much as I can disclose, there was a lot of neglect, a fair bit of neglect, I think. And I think there was aggression as well that was involved. I would have to say that there was at one point I had to be suspended from school, due to financial matters. So these were all these things that sort of added up. But I will say that in my within my family, I really think that the strength of my mom really helped to keep our family sort of intact and sane. I think that's what I will have to say. But yeah, dysfunctional. There's a lot of neglect. There was violence. Financial issues. There were all these things that came together.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So Paksan, as what Elvina mentioned, right? The situation is that it seems that it's better to. I mean, somebody listening to your story probably would conclude better for that couple to divorce, and rather than they stay together and continue the dysfunctional family status or state, right? But there's this question, right, which goes back to what's the long-term impact of divorce? Should parents divorce or stay together for the sake of the kids? And I think I got to say this really with great what do you call that, gratitude, that one of the reasons, and like most of us, especially me, there are times where our marriage are on the rocks due to certain situation, and the kids are really the ones that prevent us to take the next step, all right, of separation, of making the issue bigger. Okay, but at the same time, would having a dysfunctional family is a lesser evil than divorce?
You're asking me?
Well, asking
Anyone, right? Let me have a go.
Yeah.
Let me have a go first. I think from what I've read, the studies and all that, it seems that the most harmful thing that can be inflicted on the kids is the conflict, the very high level of conflict between the parents, and especially if the children are witness to the conflict. And I mean, we don't have to talk about violence. I mean, that's even worse, right? But even high-level conflict and frequent conflict, that becomes a very it's considered a childhood adverse experience. So it traumatizes the child, it wounds the child, right? It causes a lot of sense of insecurity, instability, and anxiety in the child. And then it begins to manifest later on in life, for example, in adolescence. Poverty is considered by psychologists a chronic stressor. Okay, so someone living in poverty, always struggling, and always having to choose whether to have to eat this or to eat that, or to eat this or to buy that, or to between eating and buying food and paying the bills. This is a chronic stressor, and of course, that is also very harmful to the mind and the brain and the body. Okay, but again, this a lot of children growing up from low-income families or even abject poverty, they seem to demonstrate a lot of resilience. So again, this is one of those situations where it's 50-50. All right, it's very hard to predict. Even today, scientists cannot really pinpoint, how to predict whether a child living in, two children living in the same, poverty level, for example, whether one would emerge, will thrive and the other will, languish, for example. So no, they have not been able to find that secret formula. So it's maybe an X factor. So I guess dysfunctional, from what I understand, is the conflict so conflict-wise, there's something you can do about it. Recently?
Yeah, I was about to say that as well, Hafiz, because while I think it takes humility to acknowledge that one's marriage is dysfunctional, that my marriage is on the rocks, for example, right? It takes humility to actually accept that, because maybe from a guy's point of view, maybe most guys refuse to admit it, if any. And so when I've heard of wives who actually initiate, let's go for counseling or let's go and seek therapy, the guys are often the ones that are not interested to do so. So, but sadly, one solution that they choose is divorce. To instead of addressing the dysfunctionality in the family dysfunction, they actually choose, which I would say divorce is one option, but not the only option. But they very quickly jump to that conclusion and then let's divorce them. But they never choose the let's work it out kind of the option first, so to speak. Which like Hafiz, you were sharing as well, that when you choose to work at it, by for the sake of the kids or not, but if you choose to work at it, then at least something can be done, So perhaps people who are considering divorce, maybe leave that as one option, yes, but do explore other options that may be available because of the many multiple effects of children and yourself and things like that I play.
So I think to conclude on this part, all right, simply conclude. Whenever there's conflict, all right, whether before divorce, that means you have a toxic environment at home, dysfunctional family, and there's a lot of conflict. I mean, that stresses the children, all right, at their vulnerable ages. Or when you are divorced, there's still conflict, because I know that there are divorced couples who make their children as the what do you call, punching bag, as the one that they actually punch each other, but they end up punching the child, and not, although indirectly they talk bad about each other, about their divorce partner and so on and so forth. So I mean, I'm sure there are other examples.
I'm very familiar with that because I run a support group for divorced fathers, and what you're describing is called parental alienation, which to many experts it is actually classified as child abuse, and so I think we will get more into that when we talk about after the divorce or even
Yeah, I actually just wanted to add, I think with what Hafiz was saying and Kevin, talking about, is it better to stay married for the sake of the children, even though there's conflict and, it could be a high risk environment, family environment, so on and so forth. And we're looking at the impact, right? So actually, we're looking at the 5 to 9 year olds, like the potentially, in between divorced couples, they are sharing a child who's about between 5 to 9 years old, let's say. I would like to say that while I was younger, I always had a fantasy of my parents actually working things out, right? So I feel that, a lot of couples out there, who are having conflict or trying to work things out, that even as the children are observing it, right? I definitely believe that as painful as the conflict is, whatever that's observed, there is this fantasy in the child that my parents are going to work it out. We're going to live happily ever after kind of thing. So, I mean, if that really is the hope of couples, of parents, that they want their children to be happy as much as they want to be happy in their marriage, consider this perspective from a child, that they really, really are rooting for their parents to work it out. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well.
So let's say the couple has decided to divorce each other. Then now comes the unenviable task of breaking the news to the kids. Any suggestion on how this can be done properly or the best way to do it?
Yeah, I did some reflection and some reading on this, although because I have not experienced it personally myself, but from the various counselors that I've heard describing how to best go through it, although for every couple it will be very different, right? I think I summarize it into 4 P's and 3 C's. One is get professional help. I think if you just go into divorce, and I mean, of course, there are some mandatory counseling there, but usually if it's unwilling counseling, it's not effective to me. So it's willing counseling, be it psychotherapy or even coaching for that matter, right? So professional is one. Second is when you talk to your kids about divorce, you have to not tell everything, the reasons, all the reasons. And I think and it relates to also depending on the perception of the kid or the child themselves, the children themselves, and it has to be age appropriate. Certain things you can tell to a 5-year-old that you need to tell that you can't tell. Sorry, you can tell a 15-year-old, but you can't tell a 5-year-old, right? Because the level of understanding is different. Okay, and
Let
lastly
me
is
interject. So
yeah.
don't tell everything. I think the other thing is to keep it fair, because let's say, when one party tells the child, he'll probably, try to paint the other party as the guilty one, because, I can't live with that guy anymore.
Yeah, later I'll talk about the three C's on that. All right. So
Okay.
the fourth P is the place and the time to talk. All right. So you need to talk together with the children. I mean, although you have conflict and you have differences and whatever that is, you have to still to be seen as together. All right, for the sake of the kid. The kid perception is about himself. The child will not may not care, but they will not think about your problems. They are not at that level yet, right? But they talk about what is going to happen to me. Okay, I think that is something that you need to understand. So you need to come together and talk. You cannot just talk, individually. All right. So that's what the experts advise. And for the three C's, is communication, commitment, and consistency. So definitely communication is very important. You have to make sure that you communicate with each other. I mean, have pre-meetings before you talk to the children about the decision and what come after that, and what are the things that are going to change, and so on and so forth. Second, with the commitment. I think the commitment must be at the end of the day. If the marriage doesn't work, the family must stay together, right, for the sake of the kid. I think the commitment when you get married, all right, that you have kids is not just about two of you. It's about having a family. So the commitment of the family must still remain, all right. And I think lastly, what Paksan mentioned just now about consistency. So I think the consistency is very important. That between the two couples, when they talk to the children, you cannot talk, only on your behalf, and you even, for example, criticize the other person along the way. All right, it is your solution as a couple, not my decision and the other person's decision. Okay, so I think in addition also, there's also always the emotions that come. So you need to avoid the emotional things that when you talk to the children, put aside the emotions, okay, that has been raging, that caused the divorce. And definitely you need to reassure the kids, right, that certain routine still sticks. All right, there are as least possible changes necessary that will be made. And lastly, I think is to open yourself to questions by the children, especially when they are a bit more grown up. Yeah.
I don't think there will be much questions. The child will be very shocked by it. I just want to ask a clarification question. You talk about, even though the marriage is over, it's important to keep the family together. And then later on, you talk about, maintaining certain rituals. Can you elaborate on that? So does it mean the after the divorce, the couple still stays together with the child, or, or what?
Yeah, so definitely, I think one hesitation of divorce is that where do they stay, right? Where do the kids stay? Is it with the mother, the father? And I think I know many fathers here, and I speak because we have interviewed some fathers, even in this podcast, that they have lesser time with the kids after divorce because of control and care and control issues. All right, so I think it needs to be agreed, between the two couples, right? That that is the ruling, but there's also what the child needs. All right, if the ruling is care control given to the mother, but at the same time the kid needs a father. All right, and even if you cannot give a 50% time, all right, that it has to be fair and just to the child.
Amen.
Amen.
Can I also suggest maybe when talking to the child is to reassure that the divorce is hopefully not because of the child, we cannot.
Hopefully, or certainly.
Yeah, no,
because
because some of them really maybe because of the child, but the parents have to agree that the reason why I'm divorcing is not because of you. Yeah, but it's because we cannot get along. There's some things that we just cannot resolve, and so we decided. But it's a decision between both of us. Unfortunately, it affects you, but it's not because of you. I think it's very important that this reassurance comes from to the child that it's not your fault. In some sense, is if humble enough to say it's actually mommy and daddy's fault that we cannot solve something like that, and so now it's becoming is spilled over to you lah. Okay, but it's not your fault lah. And then I think instead of asking them questions like I also agree that Parson I don't know whether they can understand or have any questions about that. They'll probably be in shock, I think, depending on the age, and trying to understand what I think it's more like what's going to happen. I think it's more they're wondering what's going to happen now, because things will be different really from then on, like birthdays and everything, mommy or daddy won't be around, or that kind of thing. Mother's Day, Father's Day kind of thing. All these critical events, Christmas and all that, all will hit hard lah in the first few years, So these are things that that we need to be mindful of. When stepping into this decision, I think.
I think that's what Hafiz, I guess, mentioned when he says, keep the communication channels open, because there will be many more questions as the child, matures, grows older, makes sense of things. And then there are things that you said, suddenly, I'm saying this because, I was very actively involved with parent support group. And so, we do have children, we have activities sometimes where it's a father-child, mother-child, because Mother's Day, Father's Day activities in school. So sometimes, we have children who may be raised by grandparents or missing a parent, raised by relatives. So, you can sense that suddenly they realize like, oh, okay, how do I celebrate this, or how do I make this gift to a parent who I do not see as often as I would like. So these, I think, are very, these are things that happen along the way. So like Hafiz said, open communications. They're tough conversations to have, but I think if a child knows that there is a safe environment, an adult who is able to handle the tough conversations, it's possible.
I like it that Hafiz also said about commitment, because I think it's very tempting for the parent who don't have the custody then to let the parent, the custody, to take the full brunt of it. But because of the sake of the kid, I need to be committed as well, to make time, to block out time to spend time with my child. Because while I cannot work out my relationship with my spouse or ex-spouse, I still need to be invested in the child's life, even though I don't have custody, because I am still the parent, and I'm responsible for the child's well-being and upbringing as well. So, and on the other side of it, the parent with the custody do allow your ex-spouse to have access to your kid as well, because it like it or not, their influence in their kid is a positive one, assuming that they are positive role models lah. Yeah, but do not deny them access to your children just because you are the one with custody lah, I would say.
Yeah, that's in the ideal situation, but in majority of divorce cases, care and control is given to the mother, and in the majority of those cases, fathers have been cut off from their children through parental alienation, and just the moms will make it very difficult or even impossible for fathers to spend time with their kids. All right, and especially during the pandemic, that mothers would use that as an excuse. Oh, I don't want my child to get infected, so no, I will not allow the father to see the child. So in short, what parents have done is they weaponize the child against the other ex. All right, the ex. And so that's why I say this is child abuse, because children are used as a weapon, all right, against the other person. So I think going back to what Hafiz also said, maintaining certain rituals, I think that would be a very good thing to do. In fact, that is something I advocate. You see, because when the parents divorce, now the child, well, in theory, he still has one family because he or she still has a mother and a father. But now the child has two homes, okay? Two homes which will probably end up to be quite different. So it's no longer co-parenting, but more like parallel parenting. The mother will raise the child the way she wants to. And when the child visits the father, he or she, the child will experience a totally different atmosphere. Now, this can be quite confusing to the child, all right? And I think all of you know that one of the pillars of parenting is consistency, right? Both parents should be aligned with each other, and they should be, in a sense, of one voice, and the similar approach, so that the child doesn't get confused, neither the child will be able to play between the parents. And this doesn't happen at all in a divorce. Okay, and so I think, if possible, if the divorce can be amicable, then this is something really good to happen, where, for example, both the parents, even though they are divorced, will still be able to celebrate certain holidays, certain events, like the child's birthday, Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever day, Christmas Day, for example, New Year's Eve, together. All right, I mean, they don't have to do all of that, but just choose a couple of them. All right, so that the child still is able to experience that familyness.
Just a very interesting data, that there are more couples got divorced after a longer at a longer duration of marriage. For example, those have married for 30 years or more, the number of divorce have increased. All right, apparently, from last 10 years, almost double. All right, so again, I think going to the issue of before, when parents think that, okay, for the sake of the kid, I just, we just go through this, and then after the kids grow up, they so decide that they want to go their separate ways. Maybe to them, it's will have less impact on the children. Okay, so I'm not saying that everyone should do this, right? Get divorced, but delayed. No, definitely not. All right, definitely not. I think the data speaks for itself, that parents do realize, or couples do realize, that the impact of divorce is greater. All right, if especially when they are younger, and if you can delay divorce, why not? Maybe by dealing divorce, and of course correct and adjust and improve marriage. I'm not saying just go on status quo, continue the conflict, escalate the conflict. Definitely not. All right, let time men go get help, and then I think like the majority, because definitely most people are not divorced. The number of divorce is still in a minority, and go through that marriage until the end of your life. Paksan?
Yeah.
Amen.
I think I mean, what I'm hearing, Hafiz, I think that's what is important really is that if that is the path that couples choose, right, to delay, let's say, right, then at least work on it during that time period. That's what you're saying, right? Don't say delay and then just let the whole thing fall apart, because the children are very receptive. The children know what's going on, I think, despite parents
Perceptive.
thinking that, yeah. So they're perceptive. So they know what's going on, and they see it. And I'm saying this because I have friends already in their 40s, and they tell me about how they've seen their parents just go through a loveless marriage, and they can see it. So nobody's fooling anyone, really. So I think really for such, if that is the intention of the couple, that they really should try and work it out, during that time period. And the delay process is not just to buy time necessarily.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. If you are already prepared to endure each other a little longer, and actually this is quite a long time. If you had invested a year or two in working on your marriage, all right, it could have actually turned around. In America, okay, when couples are thinking or decided to get divorced, and they were seeing a counselor, and they were told to challenge to take the divorce off the table for 6 months and work on it. All right, using a very specific approach of counseling, and it's called discernment counseling. What they found is there is a 50% chance of those marriages turning around, and after that surviving. Okay, so so I totally agree with what Elvina just said, right? Because from the children's perspective, they are living in already a two-home household. All right. You know, when they are talking to the mother, they have to talk in a certain way, and in front of the mother, they have to behave a certain way. And when they talk to the father, and be, you know, they have to talk to a certain way. And then, you know how terrible that is. Okay,
Yeah,
so it actually teaches the child to live a double life.
Yeah, it's tough to live in two camps under one roof. Yeah, for sure.
I always thought, what if divorce was not an option? What would the couple do then? You know, if that wasn't an
Fight to
option,
the death.
what? No. Then the question is like, what would you do to solve it, or what would you do to work at it, like, you know? I mean, I tell young couples, right, that, you know, when you get married, right, and then you say your vows, kind of thing, and then when your marriage hits the rocks or something, or in a rough place, recall your vows. Your vows are something that you made a commitment to each other, you know, for better or worse, for you know, sickness or health, kind of thing. You know, you're gonna see each other through. That's what you vow to each other, right? Unless you're telling me that whatever you said there was just ritual, you know, was just something that you just did because everyone did it, right? Because if you made a commitment, then live out the commitment, in that sense, right? And that's also why it's a bit of a tangent. But I always tell the witnesses, because when we get married, you know, it's in the midst of all our loved ones and our friends and everything, right? In the presence of these witnesses, I pledge my vow to you. So as the witness, I must make sure that you fulfill your vow. When I find out that your marriage is on the rocks, I should come in and help you. I should come and, you know, counsel you or scold you, kind of thing. That how come you even think about divorce? Have you worked at it, kind of thing? The community should rally around the couple, I feel, to help the couple.
That's an interesting point, Kevin, because I remember reading somewhere where if couples are struggling in their marriages, to surround themselves with people who will fight for their marriage rather than encourage them to fight in their marriage. So I think yeah, you know, I think it was interesting that, in a sense, having that sort of a support group, or you know, connecting yourself with those in healthy marriages.
You know, some studies have found that divorce is contagious. That means if you have a bunch of close friends, you know, let's say, you know, every day after work, you hang out with some people for happy hour, and one by one, they're getting divorced, okay? Eventually, it will come to you. So please get out of that group.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, I wouldn't call it as divorce, but then it becomes accepted in your circle of friends. And so since everyone's doing, that's something that's normal, then you do it. Sadly, media portrays divorce, you know, like quite common now. I mean, I read statistics back in 1980 when I was born. The average, the annual divorce rate was 1,005. And that time, I don't recall many people, I don't know many people who were divorced. And divorce was a taboo then. But now, fast forward 2022, quite normal to hear that families are divorced. You know, like it's because so common, so that becomes an option for people to choose. That's why I went back to the question: if divorce was not an option, what would you do if you hit a rough place in your marriage? What would you do? Would you seek help? Would you seek counsel? What would you do if that was not an option to you? You have to stay together. Then how? Because there's another article I read about arranged marriages. Arranged marriages, the divorce rate is actually quite low. You know, 4% to 6%.
That's true.
You know, they don't get to choose their spouse, right? But then their divorce rate, okay, granted, they don't divorce doesn't mean they're happy and thriving, but they basically they stick to it, basically. You know, that's why I go back to the question: if it was not an option, what would you do?
I have a question for all of you. Something that I had in my mind for a number of years now. You know, your spouse is someone that you've chosen, right? And you spend some time thinking about it. Sometimes could be years, right? Dating that person, getting to know that person, and finally deciding this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. Okay, so you chose your spouse. But yet, you know, how come you can't love your spouse, the one that you have chosen, unconditionally? But you can love your children unconditionally, and your children are people you did not choose. So
how long has your thought been marinating in your mind?
A number of years already. Yeah, I've asked different people, but no one has been able to give me an answer to that. You know, but to them it says, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I wonder why. So, all right. So if you chose that person, please stick with it.
Maybe by extension, the child is sort of a reflection of yourself. So it's almost like, I don't know if it's a biological kind of link up to each other, whereas your spouse is an individual person and it's different. The connection is maybe different to your child.
You
I
know-
don't know.
Do you know how many parents have come to me and says, I can't stand my child, and sometimes they say it's, he is so much like my wife, or he is so much like my husband, I can't stand. He's so much like me, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
personality clashes can happen between parent and child also. Yeah, so
Yeah, I think Paksan, there's no one answer to that. There are many reasons when you say, okay, I choose this person, it's my choice. It's not even arranged, but the number speaks otherwise, right? So the thing is, one is, how do you choose that person? Based on what? All right, and how long do you have reflected over it, or is it just, again, puppy love thing, that we discussed the last episode, and then you realize that, oh, wrong person, and you think that, okay, there's a better person, there's going to be a better person, although you don't know who's that yet.
Actually,
So yeah.
Actually, I was thinking, what if the person you chose and fell in love with and chose to marry, they change. Like we all change over years. Do you know what I mean? Then you don't kind of adapt to or transition. So one of the things I've learned is that to grow well in marriages or any relationship, even friendships, is to transition well with them as we go through different stages. Because we do evolve, we do change, hobbies might change, interests might change, your priorities change. So if as a couple, I think that transitioning together doesn't sort of go in tandem, I think, you might kind of feel, that you don't recognize the person anymore.
So when you say
Think about your
unconditional love is more apparent for parents versus kids, but not to husband and wife, for example, then work towards it. I mean, it's difficult, right? Unconditional love. I mean, it's not overnight thing. I think it's about working towards it and having the belief that you can reach closer to it, even though you don't have it yet. I don't know how many couples can say that they have unconditional love towards one another, and whatever that means. I think to different people, it means differently.
I'm thinking about Park's question. Well, to some extent, you did choose your children, or rather, you choose to have them. Most of the time, lah. Yeah, let's try to have a baby, and then the baby was made out of passion, out of love, and this baby is part of you. Like what I agree with Elvina, because this child is part of you. So there's the special bond between parent and the child, lah. Yeah. Whereas, okay, so maybe to think about it, maybe we chose our spouse, our partner. So really, our spouse is our partner, our companion, right? It's like a buddy kind of thing, right? Whereas our children is our responsibility, so to speak. And so the connection there is a little bit different, so to speak. There's a responsibility that this is my child, this is part of me. This younger person, I need to be responsible for this person. So there's some form of connection there, but then my spouse, my partner, if we don't get along, like business partner, so to speak, like if they treat it that way, then I can't get along with this business partner, then I just end that union, But again, that's why we are talking about it today, right? This topic of divorce, right? Is ending like that relationship the only way? And if not, then what other ways that we have are there out there? Because when you choose this route of the D word, so to speak, there are repercussions on your life and your children's life as well.
Before divorce, we talked a lot about, the high frequency and intensity of the conflict between the parents will affect adversely on the child's emotion and, and psyche and things like that. And so when the parents do choose to get divorced and decide, all right, it's usually the case that one of them make up their mind, all right, and then initiates the process, and leaving the other to catch up emotionally, mentally, right? And the other one who receives the divorce papers will say, will kind of be in a shock and say, to himself or herself, I knew that our marriage wasn't doing well, but I didn't know that it was so bad. All right. So one party mentally already divorced, okay, because that party has gone to see the lawyer and have made up their minds, and the other party is left wondering what happened. Okay, and can you imagine the children? Okay, even more confused, right?
Absolutely.
They don't find out until maybe months later or things like that. Now, unfortunately, what usually happens, and this happens so often, all right, is that the mother, and I really have to be very specific here, because it is the mother who takes the children, one child or a few, okay, leaves the home, and the father comes home from work and finds nobody at home, okay, and realizes later on, maybe a day later, 2 days later, a week later, that the wife has taken the child, left, and has already engaged a lawyer and started the divorce proceedings. And no, worst of all, the wife has not started divorce proceedings, and this continues, until 3 years. And because one of the legal grounds of divorce in Singapore is separation for 3 years if it's uncontested. Okay, so to me, this is not fair because, at least, especially from the point of the perspective of the child, this is a de facto divorce. Okay, the child is already living in a situation that is like the parents have already gone through a divorce, although the parents have not even started on the divorce proceedings. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Which part? that's a fair bit. Okay, so my first thought is, because I think like I said, divorce is very complicated, right? So there are a lot of factors at play. So this sounds like out of desperation or whatever. But let's assume the divorce that we're talking about is something that there's room for it to be resolved. There's room for things to work out, right? So what do I think about that? I don't think we have enough information as to, whether the mom made any attempts, because the husband was sort of blindsided by the whole thing. So, I mean, obviously, for children. Okay, so what I think for the children's sake is, as parents, we have to understand that we're all working with different timetables in terms of how we're dealing with it, right? So the mom's checked out, the husband is clueless, the children left in the dark. So I think this is really not a good situation for any of the parties. Children in particular, since we're talking about that, because the children are left with, I think we talk about what Hafiz talked about, communication. They have no clue what's going on, no connection with the father, let's say, or trying to make sense of what is happening. And then the whole healing process, I don't know, when does it begin? When does it, how it works out? So yeah. I mean, those are my initial thoughts from what you're sharing, Parkson.
Okay, no reaction. Never mind. No reaction.
They're shocked.
I like the Elvina answer, because it seems to, talk about is the mother that that is the example given, right? So I shall not comment.
Because I have know of different families where this has been the case, but this is usually really out of desperation, in an environment that puts the children at risk, where the wife probably has broached the issue, the husband ignores it, and so the wife is desperate and she has to pack up and go. So again, like I said, we don't have enough story or information, so it's hard to really say. And again, I'm speaking from a perspective of a mom in maybe extreme situations where a mom would react in that way. Yeah.
I don't know how many of you realize that the purpose of celebrating Children's Day. Do you know?
Oh, I've never thought about that. I thought it's just like and any other day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, celebrate as in appreciate, and make them happy.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, my children sometimes says, well, if it's Children's Day, do I get a gift?
Or special privileges?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, please enlighten us, Parkson.
Children's Day was actually, designated, and the reason behind it is to remind everyone about the rights of children, okay, or rights of a child. And this is the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. And you can find it on the UNICEF website, okay, unicef.org. Now, Article 7 of that convention states that a child has the right to know and be cared for by both his or her parents. And then paragraph 3 of Article 9 states that the parties, that means the parents, shall respect the right of the child who is separated from one or both parents to maintain personal relations and direct contact with both parents on a regular basis. Okay. So that's the reason we celebrate Children's Day, is to remember that children do have inalienable rights. Okay. And one of them is the right to know and to have a relationship with both parents. And in divorce, unfortunately, the child is torn away from one parent, primarily the father. Okay,
Wow.
so
Never know that Children's Day is so serious. I mean, I thought it's just about Children's Day.
going to
really,
McDonald's and going to the zoo.
having school concert, having parenting gifts. I think like many other celebration, many other so-called special days, we have so-called
We have lost sight
diluted
of its original
the
purpose.
meaning. Yeah. Anyway,
Well, that was a good conversation. Thank you all for your contributions. I think we can actually go on for hours and hours with all of you. Have so much to say about this, but unfortunately we have to end. Maybe next time we can have after the show, then we can continue this for another 2 hours.
Wow.
All right.
Because it's hot potato. The fact that we have chosen these topics, these are hot topics.
Okay,
Yes.
now it has become cold already. All right. Okay. Thank you all, and we'll see you the next time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.